Good day, everybody. My presentation today revolves around the idea of variations in post-colonial imagination. And I do this by reflecting on the thought and statecraft of Senghor, Julius Nyerere, and Kwame Nkrumah. Who are arguably three of Africa's most cerebral post-colonial intellectual presidents. The contribution to the Postcolonialism Today project is inspired by or driven by my increasing disquiet with the tendency to flatten African leadership landscape, especially the Nationalist project. And I organized my reflections around 5 themes. The idea of socialism, Pan-Africanism, nation-building project, economic development, and epistemic decolonization, as one could discern from their thoughts and writings. And then I end by drawing lessons from what I call contemporary Pan-African project. In regard to the socialist imagination, Senghor's idea of African socialism is grounded in the different stages of development of the idea of negritude, but in its original conception, and is rooted within also rooted within the French socialist tradition, in the spirit of Henri de Saint-Simon. For Senghor, negritude offers what I call the African marker on Senghorian socialism, where he contrasts what he calls African sensate conviviality against what he call Hellenic, what he call reasoning eye. Senghor rejects scientific socialism because of what he calls his neglect of cultural and the spiritual. But the older Senghor will pivot towards hybridity, with emphasis on universal civilization or the symbiosis of different civilizations. Nyerere's idea of African socialism, however, is more concretely derived from the norms of what I call solidarity, generosity, and care in the context of his upbringing. This is associational context grounded in the norms of mutuality, generosity, labor, in the sense that everybody who can work should work, and the collective ownership of primary means of production, which is land. In reference to what they call it, in relation to Senghor, Nyerere also will reject scientific socialism for different reasons, more for Marxian socialist emphasis on the centrality of class struggle and class conflict in Marxian thoughts. Nkrumah's take on socialism will involve an early conception that is anchored on what he called the restoration of African humanist and egalitarian principles of society, which continues to serve as the underlying presuppositions of his conception of socialism. But he will pivot later from about 63, 64 to full embrace of scientific socialism. Nkrumah will argue that what socialists thought in Africa must retrieve is the spirit of communalism and humanism, and its reconciliation of individual advancement with group welfare. He will reject especially the Senghorian notion of African socialism, which he will claim is more associated with anthropology than with political economy. And argue that there is actually no historical or even anthropological evidence for what they call a faster simplification of pre-colonial Africa, and that he argued could be designed in Senghorian thought. But Nkrumah will share affinity with Nyerere's idea that norms of mutuality and care, which shaped pre-colonial African societies, will be central in socialist imagination in the post-colonial socialist construction in the post-colonial period. In terms of the variations of their Pan-African vision. One could argue that Senghorian's Pan-African vision is more cultural and aesthetic than political. Nkrumah, on the other hand, is of course widely known as the what they call a leading advocate of African political union in the near term. In this sense, Nyerere would be argued to inhabit a midway house. Initially, especially at the Cairo conference in 1963, skeptical of Nkrumah's idea of political union, with preference for first pursuing regional unity in the context of East Africa. But with the overthrow of Nkrumah, for instance, Nyerere will inherit the mantle of becoming the lead advocate for African unity up to the point of his death. In terms of the construction of post-colonial nation state or nationhood, all the three people that were looking at, individuals that were looking at, for instance, shared a very strong commitment to the construction of trans-ethnic religious national identity, what one may call nation building projects, and for Senghor, he will argue that independence and nation building require first, along with self-determination, freedom of choice. There's a commitment to transcending colonial ethnicization of identity and politics among all the three. Nyerere and Senghor will be particularly quite successful in creating modes of trans-ethnic political post-colonial politics in their different countries. Nkrumah and Nyerere shared a strong commitment to the construction of nation-building, national sovereign project, constructing national sovereign project, and the right to choose one's friends, and the linking of national to Pan-African identity. Senghor will be particularly, low-key in being, in the context, especially considering that he was, from a minor ethnic group, the Sere, and a minority religion, Catholic, in a predominantly Wolof and predominantly Muslim community, to have had the good fortune of the tolerance of the Islamic Brotherhoods in Senegal. Nkrumah was less lucky, having to confront vociferous hyper-ethnic and regionalist opposition, who are not shy to use, violence, its assassination attempt, plotting coups, and so on and so forth. And as Mahmoud Mamdani will argue, Nyerere's Tanzania will turn out to be Africa's probably arguably most successful nation-building project, especially in mainland Tanzania. And here, in Nyerere, Tanzania, we had an extensive use of social policy instruments for the nation-building project. In terms of variations in their economic development imagination, this is where the strong divergence becomes quite noticeable. Senghor will, will persist with an inherited colonial economy, although with significant investment, but relatively, low growth rates. Nyerere, on the other hand, had a strong commitment to rural development on the grounds that this is where, most Tanzania, rural areas where most Tanzanians live, and it will be area where they will find their material well-being and their satisfaction. And therefore, they need to focus on rural development. Nkrumah, on the other hand, was one of the most strident and ardent, advocates of industrialization as the linchpin for economic development and freedom, with massive investment in infrastructure, industrial complex, in research and innovation, infrastructure, and so on and so forth. And all the three and more strongly with Nkrumah and Nyerere, strong commitment to the idea of what we call a better life through extensive social investment. And I'll come to the issue of the epistemic dimension of post-colonialism. And in the face of what is called the prevalent African decolonial literature, to argue that, especially using the Nkrumah's injunction that seeking first political kingdom meant a neglect of epistemic decolonization and constructing a new post-colonial epistemic identity. An alternative reading of Senghor's negritude, offered by Suleiman Bashir Diani, for instance, as epistemology, emphasizes that his take on African sensate, ontological, question and sense making, was a direct challenge to the Cartesian binary opposition of the subject and object. And this is something that Senghor carried on throughout. Nyerere's, sense making is firmly grounded in what we call the African ontological condition, especially of his rural homestead, with a strong advocacy for complete overhaul of contents of curriculum and pedagogic approaches, especially most obvious in his book, Education for Self-Reliance. Nkrumah's strident commitment to epistemic decolonization is evident in at least three areas. First is the Africana Project, which was originally under the direction of W.B. Du Bois when he relocated to Ghana. He moved to Ghana, and was launched in 1962. And especially, Nkrumah's speech at the inauguration of the Institute of African Studies at University of Ghana, Legon, which addressed the epistemic erasure at the heart of colonial project and the establishment of a strong link between political and epistemic freedom. And the mandate of the institute was, in fact, to advance what they call Africa-centered, episteme and intellectual project. It's important to remember, of course, that his most philosophical work, Conscientism, after all, carried the subtitle Philosophy and Ideology for Decolonization. For all the three of them, for instance, the idea of socialism is grounded in African ontological condition, at least as each understood it. So what are the lessons that you can learn, for contemporary Pan-African project? I will emphasize 5 areas. One is the affirmation of an expansive idea of Pan-Africanism, one that returns to the embracing of Africa and its diaspora in the Pan-African project. The reaffirmation of rebuilding of the Pan-African sovereign project, a value-based regional development conception that is grounded in the notion of structural transformation and the advancement of human well-being, and an embrace of Nyerere's emphasis on unity. And as he noted at Ghana's 40th independence anniversary address that he gave, the unity will not end our weakness, but until we unite, we cannot even begin to end that weakness. And then the issue of the responsibility of the next generation, rather than seeking to destroy the legacy of the older generation, to take out the baton where the older generation laid it down. This was an injunction that Mwalimu reminded us of, especially again at that 40th anniversary of Ghana's independence. Now, of course, it will require that we address what I call the antinomies in the nationalist project. That involves a commitment to deliberative governance and plurality, a commitment to gender equity and transformation of gender relations. Because these were critical blind spots within what I call the thoughts of and statecraft of Léopold Sédar Senghor, Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, and Kwame Nkrumah. I thank you all.